So we've got Simon Majumdar, you guys all know. He's a world-renowned broadcaster, food writer, speaker, author, cook. He's chief bottle washer and many other things, but and philanthropist and doing special events. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Brian Malarkey, you guys all remember him. We worked with him a few times. And I just love what he's doing. I mean, his restaurant, we had a great talk about the restaurant scene and how positive he is about this time and taking the positive attitude instead of looking and saying, oh my God, this is all wrong. It's like, okay, how can we make this right? How can we be better from it? So I'm really looking forward to that. You guys know he has many restaurants. Urban Wood is one that we've been to before, and he's going to talk about anime today as well. And then we've got Jack Lee. He's the CEO and haiku master from Datassential, and glad to have you back on our webinars. So let's just get started. Simon, if you're ready.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. So, when I chatted with Kevin and we talked about what I could come and kind of talk to you about, and I suggested a Scotch tasting, it wasn't quite that altruistic because it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon and it actually gives me an excuse to drink whiskey when I normally do without getting into trouble with my wife. So part of it, I have to say, is very selfish. But what I thought I'd do, and I'm going to put my screen up here, kind of share it with you now, he says, there you go, is tell you a little bit about the history of Scotch whiskey, because it's one of those things that people use the word and they often kind of get it wrong. And I thought what I'd do is clarify what Scotch whiskey actually is, give you a little bit of its history, take you through to how it became, I think, the second biggest selling spirit in the world behind Baijiu, the Chinese spirit, and how it's become so popular, but also tell you a little bit about the breadth of it, which confuses a lot of people with the different regions, but also the different styles. We get very much focused on single malts, but actually there's a lot of other styles that we're also going to taste today. And so I'm going to tell you about that. And then most important of all, once I've kind of given you the kind of lecture portion, once you've earned your corn by doing that or earned your malted barley, we're going to do a bit of a tasting. And I know most of you will have had those bottles sent to you. So let me just start. So let's just tell you what Scotch whiskey is. So those of you who listen to my food history podcast, Eat My Globe, and I've actually done one on the history of Scotch. If you enjoy this, you can go and listen to that, which will be in much more depth than I have time to do today. Know that it is a liquor distilled from fermented wort, and that's basically a beer. So a lot of actual distilleries may even work with a brewery to make this. And that comes from rye, corn, and primarily, particularly for single malts, has to come from barley mash. Now, you can see there's a lot heavier description when you're actually in Scotland. So it must be made in Scotland. So if it's a whiskey that's not made in Scotland, it ain't Scotch. It also must be in barrels for 3 years. It cannot be of alcohol ABV less than 40%. So those are kind of the key things that you're looking for in whiskey. But the main one is that everything in that whiskey must come from Scotland and it must be matured in Scotland. So it's very nationalistic, is your Scotch. Now, people want to know where the word whiskey comes from, and it is a great word, but it actually originates from the Latin. So we'll talk about where that comes from in Italy at that point. But aquavite, and we all know words like aquavit, aguardiente. These are still around now, still drinks that you can try all over Europe, particularly in Northern Europe. They have a lot of them. Now in Ireland, where this kind of whiskey that we're going to talk about first, Brian's going to be very happy, it actually originated in Ireland, Uscabetha, which meant water of life. And the Irish actually took it across to Scotland, who also spoke Gaelic. And in Scottish, again, it's still Uscabetha. So that's where the word comes from. Usca got shortened by the British or the English, who are responsible for most things bad in the world, I've been told by my wife, to whiskey. And that's where the term whiskey actually comes from. Now, one of the questions I get asked, and I'll answer this one now before we go too much into the history, is why we have different spellings of whiskey. And the reason is primarily that when Irish whiskey kind of caught on again, it really went out of fashion after it went into Scotland very, very early on as a medicinal. They stopped making it. When they started making it again in about the 14th and 15th century, they really wanted to explain to people that it was different. So they inserted an E into the word whiskey so that it could be differentiated from the Scotch. Now, the reason we have that in US whiskies is because the majority of people who started making whiskey in the United States were Irish immigrants. And also Irish whiskey was enormously popular here towards the middle of the 19th century. And so they've taken the spelling. There are some areas in the United States where you will see it without an E. Sometimes you'll see that in Tennessee, probably because they've got enough E's in the name of the state anyway. But they will have it without an E. But that's why. So they were trying to differentiate it from Scotch, which had become the kind of ne plus ultra of whiskies at that point, particularly in the 19th century. So there are some people going back into history that I think are really, really interesting. This is Maria the Prophetess, sometimes known as Maria the Jewish. And you're wondering why she was a first century Christian mystic. And you're wondering, what the heck does she have to do with whiskey? Well, she was one of the first great alchemists, the people who tried to turn lead into gold. And to do that, she would do it by trying to distill metals and spirits. So she was the one who created a lot of the distillation equipment that we have now. The one that people know, and it's very similar to the pot still that we use today, almost identical. She created the alembic still. So a first century Christian mystic. The other reason that chefs will know her is because there's something you probably use every day, even if it's just in the form of a double boiler. She created a vessel in which you put a liquid and then put it into another vat of liquid and boiled it so it could be maintained. And that's now called the bain-marie. So we have the word bain-marie because of this first century Christian mystic. It also, I think, surprises people that we have the world of Islam to thank for the fact that we have Scotch, which seems very kind of ironic, given obviously that alcohol is banned there now, in the Islamic world. But it was created to create perfumes, distillation, and medicines. And that's where the first whiskies, the water of life, were created. And they called it after their distillation method, which was burning underneath to burn off the liquids. And that in Islamic or in Arabic was al-kol. And that's where we get the word alcohol. We actually get it from Islamic physicians who would burn liquids to create perfumes that they also thought helped medicinally and to create the actual drink that we supped, the distillation. So we have the Islamic world to thank for alcohol. We also have the Italians, and here we see a group of rather jolly monks. The Islamic world began to trade with Venice and Genoa particularly, and they brought in their distilling techniques. It primarily went into the monasteries there, where they would distill it with local ingredients like juniper berries. So the very first gins, or certainly proto-gins, were made in Italy. And they took it then all around the world. So we have to thank these groups of, probably in the 12th and 13th centuries, Italian distillers who then made these alcohols. And they're the ones who gave it that word, aquavitae. And they would go into the courts of royalty, to the noble people of Europe, and start serving them these cordials as a way of helping them feel a little better. And obviously not just because it had ingredients in it that were healthy, but also because the fact that people got slightly tipsy and began to think that this was actually rather a nice thing in its own right. And that's where we begin to see the move from medicine into kind of enjoyment. It moved from monasteries all across Europe. And what we have to remember is at the time, these monasteries were where all of the medicine, all of the hospitals tended to be. They tended to be in convents. They tended to be in monasteries across Europe. So as these distillation properties moved across Europe, you began to see them turning into different drinks in different parts, using the ingredients they have, whether that's Slivovitz in one place, whether that's gin in other places, whether that's all of the different distillations that we see across Europe. They first moved into Ireland, and I mentioned Ireland earlier, and they started making them in all the monasteries there. And they would sometimes sail over to Scotland and serve them to the kings and the royalty in Scotland. And that's where Scotland first came into kind of under the spell of whiskey. Now, what happened in the 1500s, Henry VIII of Britain, or England at the time, decided that he wanted to get divorced. This all does have a point. And so he separated the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church. By doing so, he closed all of the monasteries, and these poor doctors who had all been in the monasteries, these monks, had to go and find other places to work and to survive. So they were kind of ushered into the homes of the well-known royals and the noblemen. So they started to go into houses. So the first distilleries tended to be in the private homes. And if you would look at some of the great writings of the time, Queen Elizabeth and King James, they all had lists of their cordial makers who would make 20, 30, 40 different types of cordials for different purposes every time. And one of them was the whiskey, the water of life. Now, it grew in Scotland in these private houses, but whiskey was never the top drink until about the beginning of the 20th century. The drink at the time was brandy. Brandy was far more popular than any other drink in Britain. And those of you who have read books like Sherlock Holmes or have read Oscar Wilde, you will see that they often have as their drink brandy and soda. If you've never tried a brandy and soda, you must go and try it. It is a thing of great beauty. But two things happened in the middle of the 19th century. The first, for those wine lovers amongst you, was something called phylloxera, that the Americans basically sent over, I say sent over deliberately, but not deliberately, came over with American wood and had a virus on it that basically destroyed nearly all of the vines of Europe. And those of you who follow wine history will know that most of the vines of Europe now are only surviving because they are now on transplanted American wood stock that is immune to the phylloxera. So America has never had phylloxera, but most of Europe, Spain, Italy, France, it was almost completely wiped out. The grapes, therefore, for making brandy were wiped out. So there was no brandy to be had. At the same time, the gentleman you can see on this slide here, Aeneas Coffey, created the column still. So we had the pot still, very similar to the alembic, that made a very oily, kind of slick liquid that wasn't particularly palatable, but was good for medicine. This column still you see here is what a lot of distillers use now. So basically, it's like having 3 or 4 pot stills or more on top of each other. And by the time a spirit came out of this pot still, the whiskey was clear and fruity and delicious. And that's kind of the Scotch that we have now, predominantly made, although we're going to taste one that is still made in a pot still. So those two things, A, the brandy not being available, and B, whiskey being able to be made in huge volume as well. The column still could make it in a lot higher volume. Started to serve it, and it became much more cheap, much more widely available, and much tastier. So the nobles, again, the kind of richer people, and also the poorer people, began to drink whiskey instead of gin for the poorer people and brandy for the older people, the richer people rather. The other reason why whiskey became so popular is because of its royal heritage. We see here King James IV, he was the first Scottish king who gave license to the Guild of Barbers, of all people, to make whiskey. But at the same time, you have to realize the Guild of Barbers were actually where the surgeons were. They were never doctors. They were considered surgeons, and they would give people whiskey to kind of knock them out when they did things like lopping people's legs off. So they were the ones who made it. But he was the first one as well who began to kind of tell people that they should just drink this for pleasure. And there's actually a saying that he used to love to drink it when he played cards. And unsurprisingly, he was never very good at cards. And even though when he died on the battlefield, he had huge debts because he was usually pretty drunk from drinking whiskey while he was playing it. Below, of course, you recognize Queen Victoria. Now, Queen Victoria was obsessed with whiskey. And those of you who have read Queen Victoria's kind of history will know that she had a gillie. She was always lived up in Scotland, or spent a lot of time in Balmoral. And she had a gillie, a gamekeeper called Jim Brown. And Jim Brown would follow her around and every day would give her a large drop of whiskey that was made in the Balmoral castle. He would also top off her tea with it. But one time when she couldn't get it, she went to another house that was making it. This was before it was even licensed properly, and declared their whiskey so good that she gave it a royal license, and they began to give them licenses. Quite frankly, it's a bit like marijuana here because they realized it was so popular they could make tax out of it. But she would go to bed pretty drunk on whiskey every night after having her tea. And it's something that's gone on with the royal family even now. The Queen Mother, who died fairly recently, used to drink about half a bottle of gin a day, And the Queen now drinks 4 big cocktails a day. So it's obviously good for you. So a lot of this goes back to Victoria. She was only about 4'11", but she used to drink best part of half a bottle of whiskey a day. So that's a very quick history. As I said, I've done it very quickly. So if you want to find a little bit more about the kind of fun side of that, go and listen to Eat My Globe on the history of whiskey, and you can hear it in much more depth. And the reason I wanted to just go through the history and give you some fun facts is I wanted to talk about the styles, and we're going to taste these in a moment. So people talk about single malt. So single malt whiskey has to be made at one distillery, and it has to be made out of blended malt barley. That's it. Now, what you might not know is that when you have an age statement on a single malt, that doesn't mean it's all made in that year. So if it says 10-year, 15-year, 18-year, actually it means the youngest one of those is 10 years, 15 years, or 18 years. The rest could actually be a lot older. So it's still a blend of single malts from that one distillery. We're going to taste this next one, and this is actually my favorite style of whiskey, and one people don't know terribly well. So this is blended malt. So these are malt whiskies, so single malts, but they don't have to be all from the same distillery. A classic version of this would be something like a Johnny Walker Blue. So that's made out of 7 single malts from 7 different distilleries. So they're all malted barley, they're all single malts, but they're not all from the same distillery. And we're going to drink probably my favorite whiskey of all first, which is a blended malt, and they're really delicious. Then you're going to have single grain Scotch whiskies. This is quite an unusual category. You don't see it very much. They could be out of corn. You can see it out of rye. And they're an unusual one, but they're worth going to give a try if you see them in your stores. Blended grain Scotch whiskies, again, just as you had with the single malts, these are all blended grains, but from different, whereas grain all has to come from one distillery. Blended grains all have to come from a different number of distilleries, and it can be anything up to 13 or 14 different distilleries. And then there's the last one, blended Scotch whiskey. Now, one of the things to say is this often gets a bad rep because we think about kind of some of the cheap house whiskies that we've tried in the past. I actually think it's very underrated. So this would be things like Dewars. This would be things like Teachers, Bells. And again, one of the most famous ones is Johnny Walker. Now, the reason that they're called by these names, the Bells, the Teachers, is these were all tavern owners and retail alcohol salespeople in the 19th century, and they would get their blends. They would get all the different grains, the different blends in barrels, and they would mix them themselves. And so this would be Johnny Walker's blend, the Teacher's family blend, the Bell's family blend. And then as they began to bottle them later, they carried their names and they became brand names. Blended Scotch whiskies are what I would suggest you use as a cocktail maker. So if you're going to make a Rob Roy, you use Dewars. So these are some of the different styles, and I'm just conscious of the time, which is why I'm hurrying a little bit, because I want you to taste some whiskies. And these are the Scottish regions. And just the first one, just to help people pronounce, because everyone gets it wrong in America, it's Isla. Isla. So it's not Islay, and I've heard every pronunciation. Isla. Highlands, we're going to taste the Highland whiskey, a rather good one. Lowlands tend to be a little kind of earthier. We're not going to taste one of those, but go and try a lowland. They're some of my favorites. Speyside tend to be the very fruity ones, really delicious. And Campbelltown, there's only 2 or 3 distilleries. You have to have 3 distilleries in a region for it to have its own region. Campbelltown went out of kind of as being a region, but a third one has just reopened there, so I added it back in. So that is a very quick history of Scotch, but why don't we try some? And I'll answer any questions as well, and we'll come back up. And hopefully, those of you who are listening now should have 3 whiskies in front of you. And you should have a little water dispenser, and I'm going to show you how we should test with aroma. We're going to try the Peat Monster, then we're going to try Dalmore, and then we're going to try Paul John. So just in that order. And I'll hold them down here so you can see them. The first thing to do, let's go to Peat Monster. So I know we've got Peat Monster up there. This is the bottle, Peat Monster. This is a blended malt. This is my favorite whiskey in the world. This is made by a company called Compass Box, which is a gentleman who used to be one of the head honchos at Diageo. This is a whiskey that is made out of 4 Islay whiskies and 1 Highland whiskey. So if you want to do a little sniff, if you've got it in a little glass here, just give it a little rummage around so you can get it moving in there. First of all, we're going to sniff it without water. So when you sniff that, you're going to get, the first thing you're going to get is peat. This has got Lafroig in it, one of the greats. So that Lafroig is about 50 parts per million of peat, the peat that they use to malt the barley.
We can't see
You're
it.
also going to get a little soapiness. If you've ever used carbolic soap, that's what you're going to smell here. You're also going to get a little kind of meatiness to it. I know that sounds odd, but it's got almost like cured. So you're going to get a lot of brine in there, a little salinity. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is just take a little drop of water and add a drop. You don't need any more. And this is how I prefer to drink my whiskey. No ice, which you can do. And now smell it again. What you're going to get there is almost more medicinal, which it doesn't sound like a great thing to say about a whiskey, but it's going to take you back to those very early styles. So if you sniff it, you're going to get a little bit of kind of almost like the root grain of the nose there. And now we're going to taste it first on its own. And then I'm going to suggest, hopefully those of you who've had chance have put together your little plate of goodies that you can serve with it. So we'll just take a little sip. Get it all over your tongue, all over the back. You should get a little burn from it. Peaty whiskies tend to give you that little come back. So it should give you that little tip of the tongue immediately, going all the way back. That's the peat going back. It's what you'll get there is, I've just been scribbling down some of my notes. You'll almost get a little tropical flavor in there. So like tropical fruits sometimes. A little bit of spice. Obviously it's hard. I'm hoping you're all trying it and you're getting it. Now what I'm going to do is ask you to taste it with blue cheese. So take a little bit of blue cheese and kind of get that onto your tongue. And that little enzyme from the blue cheese that makes it blue should really enliven this whiskey in your mouth. This, to me, is the perfect whiskey to have with cheese. Any cheese plate, this will work brilliantly with. Oddly enough, because of the spiciness, it will work with things like char siu. If you're doing a pairing with char siu, this is going to be absolutely, absolutely perfect with it. It's really good with barbecue. This is my favorite to have with barbecue. Have it with bacon, if you make your own bacon at home. This is, to me, this is my nightcap. This is what I like to have every time. Again, just conscious of the time, let's move on to the Dalmore. Now, Dalmore is the Dalmore 15. So remember what I said. The youngest whiskey in this bottle is going to be 15 years old. The rest could be a lot more. This is the most expensive. The first whiskey, probably about $50. This one, probably about $120 a bottle. So this is a little more upscale. This, to me, is the art of what I call the perfect art of finishing. So in about the 1980s, a lot of whiskey started getting aged in its normal bourbon barrels, but then they would finish it in other barrels, sometimes wine barrels. But in this one, they went back to the original barrels that whiskey was aged in. And this is 3 different types of sherry barrel. Apostolles, Matusalem, and one other. I can't remember off the top of my head. With Pedro Jimenez. So when you smell this first without the water, it smells like Christmas cake. If you've ever had like a real Christmas cake or a British Christmas pudding, this is a Christmas drink for me. It smells like, do we have chocolate oranges here? Terry's chocolate orange or something like that? That's like chocolate that's infused with orange. That's what you're going to get in here. you're going to get a little bit of ginger, like candied ginger off the top. So adding in a tiny bit of water. That opens it up a lot. What you should smell now is chocolate. But fruitcake, it's kind of, sometimes I hear this described as being in my grandmother's, parlor. It's got that potpourri smell to it. And when you taste it, it tastes like Christmas. It tastes like cinnamon. It tastes like all those smells you think of with fruitcake. And that's why I suggested, I've got some panettone here, but you can have fruitcake if you've got it. Particularly try and get some with the dried fruit. So this is wonderful with dried fruits. This to me is great served with game. This is wonderful with like wild duck or boar. This would be really fantastic with that. To me, at Christmas, a big slab of fruitcake or panettone and a nice ounce and a half, 2 ounces of this is like heaven. And I know, just again, conscious of the time, we're actually going to go outside of Scotland now, because single malts are now being made around the world. And I'm just going to go back to my screen for a second. These are some whiskies that are single malts that are now being made around the world. Obviously Irish. My Yamazaki that I opened for nobody, that I bought for $40 at a Japanese airport and is now worth probably as much as my rent for a couple of months. So we'll see them being made around the world. So just coming back, what we've got is a really interesting one from India. And I wanted to bring in a whiskey that you'd never probably have heard before, but single malts now being made in India are really fantastic. And in many ways, what they're doing with Paul John is they're making a classic old Scottish style single malt. This is made with Himalayan barley. It's made with classic bourbon barrels, but it's very young. The reason it's very young is because in the tropical climates, the humidity of Bangalore in the south of India, the angel share is very quick. And so if you leave it in the barrels longer than about 4 years, you basically have nothing left in the barrel. When you smell this, this is what I would imagine almost a single barrel would have smelled like 100 years ago. It's got a lot of spice to it. This to me, and the reason I wanted to share it, we're going to taste it with some chocolate now. So put some water in it. You'll see what happens is when you add water into the whiskey, you're lowering the alcohol content, and what happens is the flavonoids come out, so you can smell a lot more of the whiskey at the same time. This to me is like caramel. It's almost like a protein bar when you smell it. Now, what you can see with these two, with the color, holding them all up, is the peat monster is what it should look like when it comes out of the barrel. That's what most whiskies will look like. It's almost like a urine color. They are allowed to put spirit caramel in. Sorry to say urine, but hey, it's all going to end up that way. Then you've got the spirit caramel, and that's what they put in to give consistency. So you can see the color there. Some of this color will have come from the sherry barrels, but some will have come from the spirit caramel. And this one, a lot of this will have come from the spirit caramel that they put in to keep a consistency of color. That little dark. So that's why this one is a little darker because of the sherry, and this one is a little lighter. But when you taste this tastes like, to me, it's salted caramel. If you have this with a salted caramel bar, it works really, really well. It also works with a lot of spices. So if you've got a bit of 70% chocolate, which is always good with whiskey, that to me is almost the classic way you should taste a whiskey. A bit of chocolate, a bit of the spice. I've got more, checking my notes. It's got, to me, this is like you taste the barley, you've got a little kind of depth to it. This has got more depth, but it's very young. And what I think is amazing that in such a young time, you've got a whiskey that really exudes quality. Paul John is a really terrific whiskey maker from India, and it's actually pretty widely available in the United States. What it's also good with, sorry, Kevin, I know I'm running over. This is great with curries. So if you have a curry and you make a chicken tikka masala, and I've actually got a video that I think Kevin's going to put on the website for how to make a chicken tikka masala, and you want to pair it, this to me is perfect. And if you want to hear about the history of curries, I've just put 2 episodes on the history of curries and how curry originated on Eat My Globe, the food history website. So you can go and listen to that. So as I say, a little rushed, but I hope you enjoyed that. Got some background to the making of Scotch and how different it can be in half an hour. Usually I do this over 2 hours. But I hope you have fun, and I hope you'll enjoy these whiskies.
Simon, that was great. So, and to emphasize one of the points you made, there's a few that were, there's so many awesome points, but a couple of months rent in LA, that's a very expensive Scotch.
Well, the Japanese whiskies now, so that Yamazaki, I'll tell you, I bought it for $40. We bought 4 bottles, the last 4 bottles at Tokyo, at the airport. I think they are probably worth about, they're probably worth about $2,000 a bottle now.
Wow.
So and stupidly I gave 3 away. But that one is, that you can't find it now. You couldn't, probably at auction that might even be more than that now. So some of the Japanese, I have, if you see over where I'm pointing, you have Taiwanese, I have, there's English whiskies, I have Australian, Brazilian. A lot of people are making whiskies in a Scotch style. And so that's why I wanted to show. But I thought the Indian one, particularly as I'm of Indian heritage and eat and live on curries, this to me, and at $47 a bottle, this is a brilliant whiskey to have at home if you're a whiskey fan. Awesome. But I hope this has at least shown the variety of Scotch and Scotch style.
It's great, and I think at our events next year, we'll have to feature some of these and make a bigger deal out of it.
Well, yes, I'm obviously, as I said, I apologize. I had to rush through the kind of history just because of our timing, but I'll happily answer any questions once we get. I know Brian is going to chat now, so I don't just step on his time.
Yeah. So let's go to you, Brian. So Brian, you and I had an amazing conversation about what's going on in your world and things that you've changed and what you've done to help survive these times, but also you're a forward-thinking person and looking forward to sharing with some of our members about what you're doing and what you see the future of restaurants like yours.
Well, I think the lead-in by Simon talking about Scotch whiskeys is probably the best way to look at 2020 right now. All right. We're all going to need to take a little edge off just to get through this little mess we've got ourselves into. But yeah, thanks for reaching out. Great. I love the education, Simon. That was amazing. I would like to hear all more about it. And I would like to join the drinking process, but as a guy, we keep our drinking, and I keep my drinking until a little later in the evening, so I have a shorter runway because I don't need much to take off, all right? And once I take off, it's like Will Ferrell in the movie, it just tastes so good when it touches my lips. So we're down here in the trenches, down here in San Diego. Just announced yesterday that we will be closing our indoor dining again. I'm not a huge multi-unit operator like most of you guys on there, guys and women, 2020 Malarkey, keep it in pace here. Operators out there, but I do offer multiple different experiences to our different venues, and I have sold one restaurant group to Hakkasan maybe 5 years ago. I kind of understand how it is to have roll-out restaurants, multiple units and stuff of that nature. But we're all in the same dogfight right now, and that is, beautiful looking food up there. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And, this is kind of it can't be much more relevant right now. We just got through one of the biggest elections in the history of our country. And now I really feel this week might be one of the biggest weeks in California, at least. And I don't know really what's happened out there in the rest of the world or out in the rest of the country. But I think this is gonna be the time. And I'm so amazed by this. And maybe I'm just not educated out there, but I do believe San Diego is going to not close. There is a lot of undertaking and a lot of deep conversations right now. And, I know, everyone up in the north and even from Texas to Seattle to Chicago to New York, it's cold out there. And when they gave us that PPP money, we had play money. We had monopoly money. You could dictate our terms. But now there's no more money left. This is the final straw. You cannot take away our opportunity to make a living anymore. We are in a really tough battle right now. I think the safest thing would have been to just sit back and not open ever and just pay the rent and take the minimum loss. But now that we've exposed ourselves to hiring, inventories, back wage, all of these things, our insurances and stuff, and you're not offering any assistance for taking away our livelihood, I firmly believe that as of midnight on Friday night or 12 o'clock on Saturday day, I think there's a great deal of restaurants, gyms, hair salon, and stuff like that in Southern California that are like, I'm not going outside. It's cold enough that people aren't going to eat outside. I don't know how, again, like those other cold places have survived. I think they've just locked themselves down so tight. They're just taking the minimum amount of bleeding, and we'll see what happens right there. But they're taking away a lot of our they're taking away our livelihood. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If I was poor and my kids couldn't eat, my kids would eat. I'm just telling you, that's what it was. We're in a survival mode here like we've never seen before, and we're going to have to do what we have to do to survive. So that's the Scotch version there. We're going to talk more about positives and how, we've kind of come so far, and some of the good things that came out of this COVID are that I think we may have killed Yelp. That might be good. You'd have to be a real asshole to Yelp somebody now. I mean, we're on survival mode, and you have the audacity to say you didn't get your cup of coffee hot enough, you didn't get your food fast enough, they messed up on your order, I couldn't hear you through your muffled mask. So, I think Yelp is something that's brought some stability to us and some humble pie to the rest of the world, going, you assholes, you judged us so sharply and you dictated our restaurant so much. That you thought your voice was so great. And now, again, like I said, your voice is small, right? People want less service. They don't want the guy watering them 20 times. They don't want people hovering. They don't want that. They want less service. So that's a huge thing for us because in my industry, we've always paid a ton of labor, especially along the West Coast and New York and stuff like that. We've got massive labor problems here. I still don't think they're going to adjust the minimum wage. They all thought the minimum wage would help the low-end worker. All it did is help the server. But the idea is it's less service, and it's also a little less menu. We've really cut about 25% of our menus out because we just want to have less exposure upon these times when they come in and they start dictating our terms, and we can obviously see that nobody in the government understands how a restaurant works. We just don't turn on the electricity and turn it off. It's not retail. There's a whole operation and a whole startup cost, and kind of looking. Like I said, the bills keep coming long after the lights are off, and then we finally got some PPP money. And if we were smart enough, we were able to just put a little bit back into our operating budget so that we could take off again. But we always knew that if you were going to start us and stop us again, we were never going to be able to survive this. And so I thought we had made it to the end. I thought we were almost there. The cases are up, but the fact that I can watch a football game in Kansas City or in Florida or in Texas and see 10,000 people in a stadium, and I can't operate a socially distant restaurant with my staff in masks and cleaner than ever, that's very disheartening and very upsetting. Get back to the positives. I'll just keep talking. I think there's a pure dynamic change of landlord to tenant relationship. We are no longer the tenant. You are no longer the landlord. You are our partner, right? You in most cases, if you have people that have any idea of what the future looks like, they need us now. All right. If you want to have empty building, empty real estate, and not attract future endeavors, you leave those cavities all over your building, or you don't give rent reduction to the people who are renting from you right now. Because if you kick out your current operator who is doing decent for you and at least breaking even, you may never replace that person for years and years and years. You know, I've always been very fortunate. I could go to these very successful people and they love my charitable aspect. They know that I was able to make some money in the game because we are a horrible investment. We have always been a horrible investment, right? And finding consistency and a person and a team and a group of people that want to continue to do it is hard. But again, one of the silver linings here is that office space, it's not coming back anytime soon, if ever. That mall, all right? I know that the people love to go out and see and be seen and walk around with their bags and shop and touch, but that's having a hard time. And a lot of people are filing bankruptcy in that segment also. And Jeff Bezos just getting richer and richer and richer by the minute, all right? But you need a place to wear those beautiful clothes. You need that social interaction. You need a place to drink scotch. You need a place to cheers and toast and laugh and bring together people over a meal and have a conversation and share stories. And that is why the restaurant segment is not going to die and will not die, because we will still need it. You order that food in a box and you sit with the people in your house, you are tired of that, right? I started a big Zoom thing going on right now where I do all these Zoom classes, and I actually learned how to ship my product coast to coast to coast. And people are like, wow, this is amazing. You know, you don't even have a website. What are you doing? I said, as soon as this thing's over, nobody's going to be on Zoom. All right. This is going to be, people are going to be so over this, you know, we are talking, but I want to talk to you. I want to touch you. I want to high five you. I want to share a conversation in person. So I don't see longevity in that. It's just survival mode, you know? So that's kind of some of the things I got going there. Again, I was so optimistic. This is crazy. So I my big restaurant here in San Diego, and for those of you not familiar with the West Coast or San Diego, actually, we do things wild west out here. My restaurants seat about 300 people, 200 people, but I had this one, Herb and Wood, that had a cafe, eatery in it, that was a bake shop, did breakfast and lunch, and had these, you know, fresh pressed juices and big salads and grain bowls and all of this and retail and this. You know what we did? We gutted it. We gutted it right there. We gave away the refrigerators and I put tables socially distanced for that whole thing because I wasn't selling liquor up there. My private event space, you know what I did? I socially distanced that. So on Saturday night, this last weekend, when we knew we might be going into the purple, we did 400 socially distanced covered with 0 people outside. And people were ready to party and they were ready to have fun. And you didn't know it was a pandemic except for my staff wearing masks. You know, people are starting with a whiskey and finishing with a whiskey. You know, it's people are really out there. And like I said, somebody said this to me, and it was the best thing that keeps me going through this whole thing. A chef friend of mine in Minneapolis, Stephen Brown. He said, Malarkey, he said, if we make it through this, we are going to reap the rewards. And I was like, what do you mean, chef? And he said, in 1918, the Spanish flu turned the world upside down. People were wearing masks. The hospitals were full. The government was imposing restrictions. They were doing this. And 2 years later, it was completely under control. And God forbid it takes 2 years to get this shit under control. But 2 years later, something magical happened. It was called the Roaring 20s, all right? And we're right here 100 years later, and people are about to start drinking, fucking dancing on the tabletop, having a good time. And if we can survive this, my friends, we are going to host the biggest party the world has seen in 100 years. So there is a pot of gold, but this is certainly not a rainbow.
Hey, why don't you talk, Brian? That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? We had at every live event that we run, a chef has to drop an F-bomb. Okay, so thank you for doing that. It makes me feel at home. Why don't you walk us through? I know you talked about the menu and cutting it back. Talk to us a little bit about what did you bring on? What did you get rid of? And how's the menu look so different today?
Well, when we started back with just outdoor dining, we took about half the menu, right? We needed half the staff. We needed half the front of the house. We needed half of the heart of the house, the back of the house. And so we really just gave out a nice little spread. 1 pasta, 2 pastas, you got a protein, you got a fish, you got a chicken. People didn't care. They just wanted to go out. But we had worked ourselves back into indoor dining. And that menu was and you know what? For 3 months, we didn't change the menu. Everybody, this is an interesting one here. I told somebody this the other day. So San Diego is a tourist establishment, right? We're based on tourism. People come here for convention, for tourism, and all that. My old way of building a restaurant, how I built Seersucker and Herringbone and Burlap and Gingham and all those other restaurants back in the day was you build a great menu and you don't change it. Because by the time the information gets to, Iowa, Minnesota, Kentucky, and people are coming from those conventions, they want to have the branzino. They want to have the eggs and the bacon. They need to have the Iberico Jamon dish they've heard so much about, right? So the dishes become legend, and a little bit over time, the locals go, where's the new restaurant? Where's the new restaurant? So they're not coming to me, they're going to the newer restaurants and checking things out. Or if they are the special occasion restaurants, they're going out once or twice a year and they're coming to have the branzino, And so as the pandemic hit, for the first 3 months we had outdoor dining, we didn't change anything because we wanted people to come back and have those dishes they'd had before, right? And then all of a sudden I realized, well, I don't have any tourism. I don't have any conventions. I've lost the locals. I need the locals to get fired up. So I actually started gassing the menu, having more fun. I'm so excited to be at work. I was doing tableside Dover sole like it was like the early 2000s. I mean, I'm having fun. I'm shaving truffles. Now I've found that people are so excited. I made a rabbit and carrot pizza. Now I'm just putting shit out there that's just like, whoa, what's he doing? Oysters Rockefeller with bone marrow. Stuff that they write about on the stuff they post on Instagram, stuff they're posting and talking about. Are they going to eat it? No, but wow, Malarkey's really put a lot of new stuff on the menu. I got to go check it out. And on 400 people the other night, 40% of them were birthdays because I am the local restaurant, and there's just so few options right now. So it really made us get back on our toes and get very creative, and it's been fun. So the menu's actually gassed out right now, but now I'm shifting back down and going, now we're going to go back down to a very select menu. I can't hear you, Kevin.
Kevin, you're muted.
Nope.
I say, yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, now you're going to lose the indoor dining part. I mean, what's your capacity that you'll be able to do before that?
I have 3 large restaurants currently running down here in San Diego, one in Encinitas, a little mini food hall up in Orange County. I lost a lot of restaurants. I lost 5 restaurants during this. Those were my office park restaurants. I had a lot of management contracts, which were mainly breakfast, lunch, and I just killed it on catering. I had these massive places in these, centralized locations with huge parking lots that I did weddings at. I mean, I did 40 weddings last year at one of the venues in an office park because they're just so beautifully designed and so well done. But I lost all those because they didn't see it coming back fast. And at first I was very mad about this. But then after a minute, I was like, oh no, that just saves me 2 years of rewriting budgets that probably are never going to be successful, So it's really allowed us to look at the future. And that's a good segment where we're at right now, is that, I don't think I answered your question at all, but the future, I firmly believe, is, again, going to the landlords If you have a proper investment package with realistic goals and a clear vision of what you are, the landlords, I think if you go to the right people, you should be able to talk them into footing the bill. You should be able to talk them into giving you some operating capital in order to fill their vacant venues, right? They have the money. The developers have the money. It's them that they're going to need to start investing in us. Right? And I have this theory, and it's where we go in and you help us out and you help us build it, and then you increase your cost. You charge me more for rent. After I paid you off, increase my rent because we're partners now, and I didn't have to go ask for money from people who aren't going to give me money, because, right now, like, oh, let me take my money out of the stock market to invest in a restaurant. Let me take my money out of, other crippled industries to hop into an industry that could be in failure again next spring, So it's up to us as business people to work with our landlords and the people who own and operate the buildings to really start taking care of us. And you might find a lot of them that won't, but I guarantee you will find some that will.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the corporate dining, because if you remember when we had our ICCA summit in San Diego and you spoke with us there, we actually went to one of your places and had our annual dinner there, which was fabulous. It was great. So, but Jack, you've been, here the whole time. Thank you for hanging in there.
I got to be honest, Kevin. I feel like I should just yield my time to Brian because he's on a roll and just let it go. I will say too, your name is such a misnomer because everything you just said is great and is literally the opposite of Malarkey. So you've overcome the last name somehow. I can do just a really, really quick condensed piece. And this is really just a reminder of why it is that all of you on this call, whether you're a chef or you're a part of the supplier community that sells into restaurants, and again, doing this for chains, why what you do is so incredibly important. I just want to talk about cravings and what's happening as we come out of the pandemic real fast. Here's simple stats, right? People are tired of cooking at home now. They've been doing it for 8 months now. I actually did a poll this morning with some other people. And actually, I'll just do it right here. So Brian, Simon, Kevin, when was the last time you hugged someone outside of your immediate household? Oh. Kevin?
Who wants to go first?
Probably 8 months. Probably 8 months.
8 months.
Yeah, it's all elbows. It's all elbows. Even I think that was one of the sad, but that was one of the nice things that we got to do was kiss women on the cheek. Hello, and it's certainly it's so funny is how occasionally somebody still reaches their hand out to shake your hand and where have you
want to do it? You want to do it? Look, I'll drop another F-bomb. 8 months without a hug? Fuck that. That's crazy. But that's basically the world right now. And at home, people have been sort of cooped up. They're tired of eating mac and cheese. They're tired of comfort foods at this point. 80% of consumers say, I'm now craving something new. And what a lot of restaurants did, especially among chains, and they've done well by this, is they said, we're going to switch to a smaller menu. We're going to feature more comfort stuff because that was really important in the early days of the pandemic. But we're starting to get past that now where people are saying, I want new stuff to try. And we need to start making that shift, right? The number one reason why someone would choose food service as opposed to eating at home is to have dishes they can't readily make at home. End of story. We need to start getting really back to that. We've done great with reduced menus. We've done great with comfort foods. We need to have the really inventive stuff again. So I'll show you we have a system called Flavor where we track every food, flavor, ingredient. Do people love it? Do they hate it? Do they know what it is? We added some new pandemic metrics to all of our tracking. And we asked, hey, where do you want to actually eat this thing if you're going to have it? Do you want to make it yourself or do you want to get it from a restaurant? And how much are you craving this right now, given that you've been in this pandemic for a while? And these are the restaurant foods that consumers are most excited for. It's based on two separate metrics that we've blended together, which is one, are you craving that thing right now, given what you've been eating? And two, if you're going to have it, is this something that you'd feel like you'd much rather get from a restaurant than from at home? And you look at this, right? Chinese food, sushi, Korean barbecue. You start seeing some patterns over here to what dominates the top of this list. So if these are the restaurant foods that people are most excited for, what are the things that people least want to get from a restaurant? Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, oatmeal, baked beans, casserole, basically all the stuff that, you've been having at home. So we need to get back to the exciting things. And one way to think about this is look at the foods that people say, if I'm going to have it, I feel like I got to get it from a restaurant. So these are the ones that dominate the top of that list. What do you notice among these foods? Right? This is among thousands of different things you could eat. These are the ones that people most say, if I'm going to have it, I got to get it from a restaurant. Wonton, sushi, Jamaican food, cannolis, Middle Eastern food. With the exception of, I think, like donut, maybe, it's all stuff from around the world. Right? That's it. That's where restaurant stuff wins out, is all the things we could bring from other cultures and dishes that people are just, frankly, not ready to make at home, or they just don't know how to. Put it another way, we can look at this at the cuisine level, right? What are the foods that people, cuisines that people feel like they want to have at home versus away from home? Away from home wins in almost every case, except for American food at the bottom. And arguably Italian and Mexican food, which you could almost argue are sort of like American food in some way, or so entrenched in just like what we consider to be American food. But no one knows how to make Japanese food at home. Well, I mean, you all do, but you're not the average person. People don't know how to do that. They want to get that stuff from restaurants. So we think innovation really is the way that food service and restaurants wins coming out of this pandemic. There has been good reason not to be hyper innovative for the last few months because comfort has been important, but I think we are escaping that right now. And you better have a pretty full innovation pipeline, especially focusing on stuff from around the world. I'm not saying do like an authentic, crazy Japanese ICCA dish on your menu. I'm saying apply some Japanese flavors to your burger and make that thing a little bit more unique and interesting. Kevin, I got a little bit more, but we can pause here and we can save the rest for next time, if that's all right, because I know we're time.
I'm so excited. I was right on point with all the studies. That's good. I'm just out there feeling it myself.
You got it.
Like I said, they wanted the stuff they didn't get for so long. And then after a little period of time, I realized, oh shit, I got to go for it now. And we were we're putting some fun, over the top dishes that make people so excited that they get to tell their friends, maybe not in person, but on an email going, I was out last night and I had, we have a pizza we put on with like this kind of spicy orange mustard with pork belly and crackling on it. It was just like, you just roll all that churro. I think people are like, this is the best, really have fun with that.
Yeah, we got to bring that excitement back. Absolutely.
Jack, I really love that information. If you wouldn't mind giving me the information afterward, I'll get it on our website on Friday,
sure.
Because the video will go up on Friday as well, sharing with what we did here today. But,
yeah, absolutely.
And I will apologize to the audience, our members and sponsors. We didn't get a chance to do a whole lot of Q&A, but what we'll do is I'll send maybe an email out with some of the questions and get answers and put that up on our website on Friday as well. But before I go to the final thanks, just a final shot from all of you. Simon, you want to give us your final thoughts here?
I hope that as people go out, they'll try more Scotch. I know bourbon. We had a fantastic session on bourbon last time I was able to join in, and it was wonderful. I want people to go back and discover Scotch in all of its varieties now. Go and see it, and don't just get stuck on single malt. Go and try blended malt, and if you want to, I am not paid, but go and buy a bottle of Peat Monster.
Cool. Jack, your final thoughts?
I think this session was amazing. I actually want to compliment everyone on this panel, and also you, Kevin, for this thing you put together. It was extraordinarily well done. I feel like I should have just been a spectator today, but it was awesome. Good job.
Thank you. We always appreciate you being with us too. And the final say will be Brian. You were awesome. Thanks for your energy and your positive attitude.
Thank you, Jack. No, I was screenshotting their information, so it's so good.
I was texting someone. I'm like, that asshole. He's like not paying attention. But
there was some great intel up there. I didn't know Jamaican was number 4. It was pretty exciting. But the idea is, down here, kind of in the forest, you don't see the trees sometime, and you really had a big perspective up there. I was just telling you what I see in the trenches on a day-to-day basis here. And I think we'll all be drinking a lot more when we get through this thing. But there is, like I said, some light at the end of the tunnel, my friends. And as difficult as it is right now, and I know a lot of people who are doing to-go food are killing it. There are people in this segment that are killing it. I'm on the higher end. We try to do to-go food. It doesn't work. It doesn't offer the price value perception when I'm eating a steak or a piece of fish out of this box I paid $50 for or whatever. So that's not going to be something I can grow into in the future. But like I said, the world is going to celebrate. And I think Jack is 100% right. People are going to be bored of Zoom. They're going to be bored of the old regular food they've been eating. And it's time for us, again, this is a new beginning. It feels like the world has torn us down. And it's time for us to come through the ashes and start kicking some ass. And we have to get over the old comfortable, and we have to start stepping it up and giving the world something new. There's a new audience out there, this whole new group of millennials with their money, all these people coming up, and the way they eat, think, and drink is all different. So we have to dust ourselves off and come at this full force. So we are ready for the Roaring 20s Part 2. Thank you all very, very much.
Love it. Yeah, well, thanks to all of you. And again, a special thanks to our sponsors and members who joined us today. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we're skipping our 2 weeks from now because it's a day before Thanksgiving. And maybe it's a day for all of us to go out to a restaurant and support the industry. And I think it'd be hard to do it the day before Thanksgiving. But our next one is going to be on December 9th, and we're calling it a holiday party. And the format's going to be, we're going to try to get more sponsors and members to come on and share like we've done here today with us, but to come on and share what's going on, do a little toast to everybody. The sponsors are putting together, many sponsors want to send out some gifts to members. So make sure you RSVP a good address to us so we know where to send it. But you'll get emails from us on that, and it'll be in the newsletter as well. But we look forward to that, and we look forward to actually cheers for the holidays on that holiday special that we're going to do, and to give a final goodbye to 2020. So not to end on a horrible note, but thanks everyone. We really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on December 9th.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much. Pleasure.